I have a burn book, like in Mean Girls. I have a burn book of sales managers, either my own or my friends, my peers, who have just swept in and gone, oh, Bethany said you could only get this? Oh, no. I can give you this.
Yeah.
Boo. Terrible. You are a bad sales leader if you do that. And
bad sales leader. Bad
salespeople. Bad. Because it just hurts everybody. Yeah. The rep looks like an idiot because they couldn't get the right price.
Yep.
The client thinks, okay, this company doesn't know what I'm doing, and they've given me a rep that's an idiot that has no power or authority to do anything.
Yeah.
And the manager shot themselves in their foot because guess who's going to have to negotiate every deal moving forward for that customer? And if you are enabling that as a sales executive, you're a bad sales executive. Burn book goes all the way up. Don't worry.
Hello, and welcome to Haverin About, our brand new podcast where we mix stories, strategy, and a bit of Scottish-style blethering. I'm Stuart Miller.
And I am Bethany Miller-Euros, his daughter and co-host. So, Dad, what has been occupying your brain this week?
Well, aside from work, planning for this podcast, etc., house insurance.
Oh.
The audience may not know, but we had a big storm here in southeast Minnesota at the end of July, and it blew over 100-year-old oak in our side yard. Unfortunately, it did hit the house, and it's kind of wiped out the roof of our kind of garden room extension that we have off our living area, and sort of sideswiped the kind of block end of our house, and punched through the chimney stack and destroyed a bunch of the siding and things. And so that happened in the end of July. We're recording this towards the end of September. So you can see it's been a few months. And we've been going backwards and forwards with the insurance company, and it's and with contractors to sort of like try and get what we need done to the house. And we have a good insurance policy, but if you've ever made an insurance claim, on your property, one of the things you'll realize very quickly is it's business. The insurance company on one side has the objective of giving you enough money, but not too much. And you have the objective on your side of, I want my house made good to the standard I insured it for, which in our place is replacement value, which is they're supposed to make it good as new. Not just, okay, well, your house is 20 years old and the siding was 20 years old and the roof is 10 years old. So therefore, we're only going to pay you X.
Yeah.
So, from that perspective, we're going backwards and forwards, and they've come back and said they only want to patch some stuff. And we've said, no, you're going to have to replace it all. So I've been off doing research on the particular brand of siding and the particular roof shingles, and working out the kind of rationale as to, well, why would we have to replace it all? And it's like, it's great. So what I found out about the siding is, well, yes, it's still available and in that color, but no longer in the long lengths that you would use, which is like 14 foot and longer. They only do them in shorter lengths, which means that this big solid side of our house is going to be made up of a patchwork of these shorter lengths. So I've said it's discontinued because they've discontinued the lengths that are being replaced. And so therefore it all needs to be replaced, with an appropriate product. And then the same with the roof shingle. What I found out from the company that manufactures the shingles that are on there is that they are certified as a system. And so therefore for your warranty on the roof, if part of it was older, like installed, and then they replaced another part of it, it's no longer a system because they're obviously different ages and so on and so forth. So therefore the warranty is degraded. So I've been working out all my arguments as to why they have to replace the entire roof, because they've effectively, it's not being made as new. So that has been my week, is just like never-ending research and coming up with logical arguments as to why it has to be one thing rather than another. And ultimately, it's down to the classic thing of insurance company only wants to give you so much money and you want more to be able to get to where you feel that you should be.
When as you've and Mum have been telling me about this, it's just like the negotiations that we do in sales, because I saw the insurance company sent a report and said, well, this is what's wrong. And then the contractor or the doctor came in and said, well, yeah, but this is what needs to be fixed. Yep. And then they came back and said, well, we'll do that, but not this. And the two of you and your contractor, or you and your doctor and the insurance company, you're just redlining this document back and forth. Until eventually, I guess you're going to land on something and you will no longer have a hole in the side of your house anymore at some point, maybe.
Well, and obviously that's our objective, is to get the solution that we believe that we need to be able to sort of continue living happily in this house, etc. And I think that it's kind of interesting. We've reached an inflection point where we've had to initiate something called the appraisal clause. Google it. You'll work out what that is. And basically, it's bringing in some experts to say, well, what is going on in terms of the value of the house if you do this or don't do this, etc. And so that process is about to go on now. Horribly, if they don't agree, because basically the insurance company gets an appraiser and we get an appraiser, and they're supposed to resolve it through a negotiation process. If they don't reach a successful conclusion, then the horrible part beyond that gets a little bit more legal, and it has to go to an arbitrator who basically will sit in judgment and go, well, I agree with that guy, or I don't agree with him on this, and et cetera, and they will basically make a ruling as to what the claim should actually be. But we're pretty convinced, myself and our contractor, pretty convinced that the insurance company has lowballed us in terms of, they've given the minimum they really need to, and that actually, through this appraisal process, we'll get up there. And so it's that classic thing of starting in different places and trying to come to the middle at a point whereby, as one of my old bosses used to say quite often, is nobody's happy.
Nobody's happy.
The classic thing is try and make everybody happy, and that's usually almost impossible. But now we're trying to get to at least nobody's happy. It can be satisfied, but not happy.
So you've been dealing with all these contracts and red lines and experts and pushback. Obviously those are skills that you have learned over your career, and it's nice to know that you can apply it to not only selling healthcare technology, but also with home insurance. Yeah. And it is a flawless transition into this week's episode, which is all about negotiation. If you're enjoying Haverin About, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps more people find us.
And of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next bit of blethering. You wouldn't want to do that, would you? Yeah, negotiations. So negotiations are everywhere when it comes to dealing with healthcare information technology. Clearly, the contracting cycle is one part of it, but it can also be about negotiating an implementation plan, negotiating some variation to support that if you have a situation you suddenly need extra support or more accelerated support. How can that happen? So those negotiations happen everywhere. But I think what we're going to do, and they also apply to kind of like partner relationships as well. If you're in a commercial setting and you have partners, you're often in a situation whereby you're negotiating what the roles of your alliance are going to be. Or if you think about it from a personal perspective, when you join or sometimes even when you leave a company, you get involved in negotiations, and it's how you apply those. But I think today we're going to concentrate on the real aspect of, how do you handle negotiations as a vendor with a hospital or health system, and vice versa? How, as a health system, do you handle your side of those negotiations? Which, I maybe tell a little anecdote about when I left the provider side as, a kind of a hospital manager over to the kind of dark side, i.e. working on the vendor side. The procurement manager of the hospital system I was in, I'd become quite good friends with. And he actually gave me a gift of a book, which was the Miller Hyman Strategic Selling. And he said, take this, you're going to need it. So there was a guy who was heading up procurement inside a hospital who basically was trying to understand the playbook of the vendors. And so that was a very important lesson right early in my career, in my early 30s. I went, boy, right. Okay. He was a smart man.
Yeah, buckle in. You got to learn this stuff. All right. So let's dive straight into it. One thing that I think you and I both love is, when you've gone through all the selling cycle and you're getting to this negotiation stage, what are the terms that you are actually negotiating? How do you break down that 60 plus page contract, which may be your own company's contract, as well as any subcontractors that you're using, any hosting or anything else? How do you break those things down into the actual negotiables?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting when you actually get involved with a hospital or health system. Sometimes they'll have, if they're big enough, they have internal counsel, either a procurement specialist who is quasi-legal, maybe even a paralegal. Some health organizations have lawyers themselves on that will assist with the procurement. All health systems typically have some kind of legal counsel in-house, but they may be focused on different aspects of legal risk. And not necessarily always procurement. But either way, you will have somebody who is going through and trying to be nitty-gritty about every line in your 60 to 100-page contract. And so the challenge is, that can be tiresome and tedious to go through. But the real meat typically comes down to anything from 5 to 20 key items that are real deal breakers potentially in terms of between you and the party on the other side. And so looking at that and breaking it down into a term sheet, which is I separate those out from the huge tens of thousands of words in this big contract and break it down into here's the critical things that actually really matter to both of us. And quite often...
I'm going to get a prop. There's a prop. Yep. So if you're watching on YouTube...
Love the prop. You get the prop. I'll carry on talking. But really taking those key items, breaking them down and making it very explicit. What is it that we are likely to sit and have a debate about? And how can we position against that? Because that does two things. One, it provides some focus through all this mist of war that is the kind of like legal rattling the saber that goes on the rest of the contractual document. But it also allows you to start plotting a strategy as to how are we going to try and position each of these things? Where have we got some flexibility to have some debate and give some things? But it also allows you to kind of weigh up that as you go through that term sheet, it allows you to weigh up what is the relative importance from one party to the other of each of these items that are in the term sheet. So I think term sheets are really, really useful. And aside from anything, it's great when you can go check mark against one of them and go, all right, we've reached agreement on that one. What do we boil down to now? Yeah.
So my prop, for those of you listening on podcast services and not watching on YouTube, is an index card. Mine aren't as fancy. So this is one of my favorite tips from Mike Fiorito, who Dad and I both worked with. Yeah. Incredible salesperson. And what was great about him is, yes, he could do all the sales negotiation stuff, but he broke it down and he always had these index cards and they always had his name on them. They were very bougie index cards. And he would literally just write down column by column what they wanted, what we wanted. And he would sit and be like, okay, where do we need to be here? And that, there's been times when, and I'm sure, as you're prepping with your sales manager or your finance team or your legal team, and it's like, they really want, 3-year term and, and we really want to push them to 5. And you spend like hours, figuring out how you go from 3 to 5. And then you get into the conversation, you say 5 and the client just goes, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah. And you're like, wait, I just prepped all of my rationale and my reasons why, and you just agreed to it. But you've got to prep for all of those things. You have to know. And this is where I think where you're really lucky is if you're in like a 200 to 500 person company, because any bigger and your legal teams are like, you're not going to get to your general counsel. They're too far away. And if you're a small team, you are also stretched that you don't know what's going. But when you're in a couple 100-person company, you do have access to your legal team and your security team, your compliance team, If they are good and they are smart and you have a great sales enablement team, which we've been blessed to work with many great sales enablement teams in our careers, they will explain to you the contracts and they will explain why we want certain things and why we don't want certain things and where we have flexibility and where we don't. And if you are a salesperson and you don't understand those things in your contract, you have to go to your manager or your legal or finance or whatever bit you don't understand and figure out why they care about it.
Yeah.
Because there's probably a reason. There's hopefully a reason. But you have to understand kind of their rationale behind what they're sticking on for some of these things.
Yeah. And sometimes the other thing to watch for in your career is sometimes that will change. Even within the same company, within, the same product, you will find that last quarter, the company wanted this, and that was important to them. And this quarter, they now have shifted their position as to what's a drop dead item. And that can often be informed by things that you don't have visibility into. Like quite often, I remember if there had been a financial audit inside the company, I've worked for a lot of publicly traded companies. If there'd been a financial audit and the auditors come in and go, well, I know that was how you were treating revenue recognition, big words, but now we need you to treat it this way. Suddenly, that can shift in a second your whole negotiation position from one quarter to the next quarter, because now they're basically, the auditors are saying, if you don't change the way you handle this, then we're going to move that forward. We're going to treat that revenue in a different way. That may impact what the CFO is able to project forward. So it can be things that seem very Byzantine and unrelated to you trying to get a deal with the customer. You need to be able to adapt to that. And you need to stay on top of those things as well. Keep your finger on the pulse, your ear to the ground, whatever analogy you want. You need to stay tuned into, are things shifting? And as Bethany said, I have worked with some amazing sort of like deal advisors internally who were basically in charge of that. And usually it was somebody in finance who was staying on top of those things and then would be directing what was happening with effectively deal telegraphing. How can we shape things now? There's been that's a person to, if you're going to be responsible for negotiating, that's a person to develop a very warm relationship with. Buy them chocolates, buy them flowers, whatever it might be, depending on their interest, because they become really important to keeping you in the right guidelines for being able to successfully negotiate. So that's another kind of experiential tip that you should try and get early on in your career, is make sure you understand who those people are so that you can have that rapport.
When I think anyone that sold healthcare technology software in I'm going to say like 2017 to 2022, everything was shifting from term license and subscription, where guess what? If you can secure a nice 5-7 year term, life is great. To subscription, where, I worked for a company where they shifted from, yes, we want 3 year, 5 year, and we will compete on your 3 year, 5 year. The more years, the better. You will get more money. Mm-hmm. And then literally overnight, it was, don't care about term. We just want 1 year subscription. Subscription. That's all we care about.
Gap rules changed, and suddenly it didn't matter if you had a 5-year SaaS ACV agreement.
Because that's not what
suddenly didn't mean anything from a revenue perspective. Yeah,
exactly. It's good times. Good times when the industry shifts like that.
I don't know. It left a lot of scars on me at the time.
I think the other thing, to just go around, as well as knowing your own company stakeholders and what matters to them, is understanding who you're selling to, their internal stakeholders and process. And that's been you mentioned Miller Heiman. That's been a thing in sales for forever, right? You got to know who signs the deal.
Yeah.
But that has shifted, again, tremendously over the last few years. And you would think, you and I have both done campouts for a wet signature, and you just sit in the lobby, you sit in the Panera and the Starbucks, and you wait for your wet signature. Now it's mostly electronic, but that's not necessarily easier. In America, we say like and subscribe.
In Scotland, we say, don't be a numpty, just press the button. No, because a lot of organizations have invested in, procurement automation systems, either as part of their ERP in an extension or a specialist products to be able to do it. One of the things that does is it takes it from, like you were saying, in the old days, CIO would get the final copy of the contract from you and either would walk you in to the CEO to sign it, or they would walk in, get it signed, and come back out and go, there you go, congratulations, and off it would go. So it was a very linear transaction. You understood it, very cleanly. The challenge is now, and this kind of reflects back on the Knights Who Say No that we discussed last time, and that is in the Substack article, is now in that procurement approval system for a contract, you might find there are 15 steps and 7 people who are involved in the 15 steps, with it going backwards and forwards. And I first came across that in a deal I was trying to get done with Orlando Health, whereby we were sat with their paralegal person, and she was trying to explain to us why this was going to take 3 days. And I was like, well, okay. And she explained who each of the parties were in their chain, their workflow chain. And then she explained how 2 of them were out on PTO. People at an executive level in hospitals and health systems get a lot of time away, either for personal family PTO, or they go on conferences, or they're just out of the office. And so therefore, those 2 individuals had a policy of they wouldn't sign anything that wasn't on a locked down computer at their desk. And so therefore, they had to be in the office to push that button. They wouldn't do it on their laptop. They wouldn't do it on their phone. It was literally their policy was, and it was individual policy, that unless they were there at their desk to press that button for their approval of that step, then it didn't get done. And that's why she had to explain to me. And unfortunately, it was quarter end, and they weren't going to be back till 2 days after. Yep. And of course, I got a less than friendly call from our CEO of, what do you mean they're not going to sign today? So those kind of steps. So that's why it's very, very important to try and diagnose not only who those people are, the Knights Who Say No, but also how are they going to execute? It's one of the things I ask my salespeople all the time. Do you know exactly, do you know what software system they're using to sign and approve this? How are they going to do it? How are they going to execute? Who's on PTO? Who's out of the office? What are the backups? And have that conversation with your executive sponsor, whoever it might be, to try and get that inside track as to, what that process is, because you will be gotcha'd in ways that you can't even imagine. And it's very, very important for your own sanity, as well as to give accurate reporting back to your leadership as to where that goes. So that I think is an important part of, yes, the technology has made that nominally easier. It's also made it more complicated. And that then typically, complication normally means not easy. So
when I've managed a sales team, I've not believed a close date unless I have seen an email where they've said, okay, just to confirm what we said on the phone, or here's the notes from the meeting where we discussed this. And it says in there, we'll sign by X, by Y on this date and by this process. And we'll go to this person and then this person on our side. Unless I see that written down, I believe that you're trying for that date, but I don't believe that the client has necessarily agreed to that sign date. 2 very different things.
Well, and just as you're saying that, and I'm thinking about the Knights Who Say No, there's one I forgot to mention last week that is appropriate to negotiations, which is the whole idea, and we came across this several times in my career, whereby an external procurement consultant is brought in, who typically is wheeled in as a negotiator to review your contract. And sometimes that can be just pragmatic of, like I was explaining earlier on, they don't have any inside counsel who are doing this, so they bring in a lawyer or something. The other one to be careful and watch for is a procurement consultant. Typically, that is somebody who all they do every day is negotiate vendor contracts. And so therefore, they are trained, experienced, and have a lot of history of sitting down opposite vendors. And they are typically paid a bonus if they're not on a flat rate on the basis of, okay, how much can you get this price down? So if there's a starting place and then they come in, anyway, they can structure their consulting gigs the way they want to, but typically they will come in. One apocryphal story, which was in the mid-Atlantic when I worked there for a company a number of years ago, there was a very well-known by name consultant who basically got involved in every single deal we did from Maine down to Virginia, up and down the I-95 corridor. So wherever we were shortlisted and were vendor of choice, up he popped. And basically, I think he was following us around. And then he would go to the CFO of that institution and go, I know how to get these guys. If you just hire me and and here's my fee, etc. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we got to the point whereby CFO at the time is a gentleman called Bob Coletti. Bob basically, the way to try and shorten your negotiations was if you said, yeah, so-and-so is involved in this one, you just go, insert a string of expletives, and then you go, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. Just, okay, I don't even defend that. Just fold on those, but do it gracefully. So that was it. So I think that's another player that as you're negotiating, just watch out for suddenly a consultant, an external consultant being introduced who is not outside counsel, but is actually a procurement consultant.
Yeah. I have a burn book. Like in Mean Girls, I have a burn book of sales managers, either my own or my friends, my peers, who have just swept in and gone, oh, Bethany said you could only get this? Oh, no. I can give you this.
Yeah.
Boo. Terrible. You are a bad sales leader if you do that. And
bad sales leader. Bad
salespeople. Bad. Because it just hurts everybody. Yeah. The rep looks like an idiot because they couldn't get the right price.
Yep.
The client thinks, okay, this company doesn't know what I'm doing and they've given me a rep that's an idiot that has no power or authority to do anything.
Yeah.
And the manager shot themselves in their foot because guess who's going to have to negotiate every deal moving forward for that customer? And if you are enabling that as a sales executive, you're a bad sales executive.
Yeah. And what's worse?
All the way up. Don't worry.
What's worse is when you're a sales manager and you try to be good and ethical and strategic and planned about this. And believe me, there are times when you might say, listen, you as the rep, your relationship that you've built and established with these guys is so important. I don't want you to be the bad guy.
Yes.
So let me play the bad guy, particularly if it's something whereby you're drawing a hard line. Absolutely not. And so that's one that I think if it's negotiated and it's clear and transparent between you, then that's fine, because then it's part of your playbook. It's part of how you're going to sort of conduct the relationship with the client. The one that I hate the most, and I've probably got a couple of CEOs, maybe not in the burn book, but whereby I'm like, okay, I'm never getting them involved in a negotiation ever again, is where you bring the CEO in to kind of like do the kind of warm, kiss the baby meeting with the C-suite on their side and things. And then suddenly they're giving stuff away that you fought really hard to defend. And I've had that happen to me a couple of times in life. And I would say that particularly for smaller organizations, be very clear about that. If you're going to undermine the guys that you've got doing that, because this is the company is literally your baby that you're trying to grow and accelerate, but still try and be ethical in the way that you deal with that and be professional about how you do it. And the greatest I have ever seen a CEO be is he turns around to that C-suite and goes, I really want to thank you for your business. I think you're awesome. This is my guy. This is my gal. I really trust them. They're going to look after you. So make sure that is how a CEO should behave, even if internally they're screaming and going, oh my God, I want to close this deal. So I think that it's about trying to have that restraint and not be the person who, because what will happen is that customer will remember, okay, I need to go all the way to insert name of CEO to be able to get the best deal or to get the attention. And if they give out their cell phone number or they give them a private email address or something, and to establish this warm rapport, believe me, that customer will never lose that and never forget it.
Yeah.
And they will go, okay, I now have a hot wire. Yeah. It can seem very enabling and empowering to do that, but just be very, very careful about, what you wish upon yourself.
Absolutely. No, I think if you're a rep, you just have to be aware of, if you are the quarterback for the account as the account manager, or if this is a new logo account and you're out there being the hunter and you are at the head of the pack, you just have to be aware of who you're bringing in.
Yeah.
And, I love a prep call. It kills me when the chain of command in sales do not turn up for the prep call. Because they're like, I know how to sell. I've been selling for 30 years.
Yeah.
But you have to enable the rep, because otherwise, why is the rep there? If you are the leader and you can close every deal yourself, why are you paying someone six figures?
And that's why I bring up that comment about early stage companies, because in very early stage, like startups, it usually is the CEO who is out pitching and trying to close deals. And as you scale and start to have a sales force, it can feel very dangerous to let go of that and to feel like you can trust your sales team to close the deals. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you find that you haven't hired the talent that you thought you were getting. Mm-hmm. So that becomes really important. We can do an whole podcast about the kind of, okay, well, who are you hiring and for what type of capabilities and competencies?
Yes.
But let's save that for another time.
Yeah.
But I think it becomes very important that as you scale, you can no longer be the closer as the CEO. You've got to look at being able to enable your sales team to take that over and to be in that position whereby they're closing the deal, they're negotiating the last items on that term sheet.
Well, I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of what's best in a deal for a customer. It's not necessarily what's best for the rep, and it's not necessarily best for the company, right? There are certain times when one of those three will win. There's always someone who's getting a better deal, right, in a deal. And it could be any of those three, right? And it's, especially I think for the company, that goes back to what I was saying about, it used to be a 3-year term, now it's a 1-year term that we want. Well, okay, that's great for the company, but it's impacting my commission.
Yep. Yes. When we've had deal structures change in the middle of a commission year, that's always a really, really gnarly one for people in a sales role, is that you start the year, you get your ICP, your comp plan, and you look at it and you go, oh, okay, I've got a fair chance. I've got this amount of pipeline. Yeah, okay, I can see how I can do that. I need 5 deals of this size, 3 deals of that size. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that'll get me to these triggers. So, if you've been in sales for a long time, that's the first thing you do. All the verbiage about, the company's rights to do other things. But another thought, we need a podcast on compensation plans and how to adjust to them. And I think we both know a really good friend for that.
Yeah, I think he literally wrote a book about comp plans. We'll get him on.
Sure. We'll get Chris on the line. Anyway, so I think that it's very important to look at that. But also misaligned incentives becomes very important. I'm sure Chris would cover this, is when you're creating a comp plan, it needs to be aligned with the company's objectives, which need to be aligned with the executive's comp plan. Because I think the other thing that can happen is if the executives have a set of incentives, either related to the growth of the company or some metric that is out there or suite of metrics, and that doesn't map onto the way you have structured compensation for your sales organization, you're going to get misaligned incentives. Because the salespeople are going to be out there trying to structure deals that are this shape, let's say rectangular. And meanwhile, the executives are sat there going, no, everything needs to be an octagon. And that's when things get really, really complicated on the vendor side of things to try and be able to negotiate that through. But I think that one of the other things is that kind of applies a little bit similarly in terms of on the client side as well, whereby sometimes, you'll have somebody who is there and they're driving for, I want the best technical solution, but somebody else will be driving and saying, I want to spend the minimum amount of money. And that money can then break down to a fight between, I want to minimize OPEX versus I don't want to spend any capital. And that might seem perverse in these days of SaaS, but it still applies that sometimes you can have pocketed or bracketed budgets that are being addressed for a given solution, and you need to understand how those work. But sometimes people are looking for some other value out of the relationship and the partnership that sets you apart from either your competitors or strengthens the relationship you're going to have. So I don't know. I mean, do you want to explore that for a few minutes in terms of how you can sometimes negotiate in a deal things that aren't just about the money or the SLAs?
If you're enjoying this episode of Haverin About, the best way you can support us is really simple. Click like, leave a comment, and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. It really helps more people find the show, and it means an awful lot to us. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially when I've worn the hat of kind of more of an account manager, a strategic account manager, if you've got some big name brand, lovely clients that you would love to shout from the rooftop, contractually negotiating use of logo, use of name, contractually obligating them to webinars and white papers and case studies, that is huge, huge. Because you can then go to all of the ones that are similar to them and say, well, look, they use us. Can you hear all of this great stuff? And you know what? I will always give a little bit in a deal dollar-wise if I'm getting something like that in return. And I think most companies would agree with that, depending on your company, where you're going. Like, if you just need cash in the door because you're just trying to make payroll, very different story.
Or you've got a mature product and it's about churn, just keep building the volume.
But think
that's not typically true with a lot of technology solutions. Typically, you are trying to, establish, more market acceleration on the new logo side.
Yeah. What other creative things have you negotiated into contracts?
Oh, we have had attendance at user conferences.
Yeah.
Sometimes because of the operating budget, people have a challenge being able to attend user conferences or conferences in general. And sometimes we would be able to add seats to that are basically, free of charge as far as the registration is concerned. You still have travel and hotels and so on and so forth, but you would actually sort of facilitate that. But the other thing that we did with a couple of organizations in my time was, because they were acting as reference customers, we actually helped them build out a reference suite, literally a space that allowed them to be able to host their guests there. And sometimes that's funding certain technology in that space, like projection technology or audio technology. Sometimes it was in relationship to just literally furnishing and rebuilding it to make it acceptable. I take a dead space in an organization's buildings and turn it into something that's actually usable. And the advantage for that organization is they then get to use it for other things, not just for when they're hosting one of your potential customers. So I think that's another one. I was
going to say, I think it goes back to, yes, you as sales, your job is to get dollars in the door, but it is important to be cross-functional. Go and talk to your customer success team, your reference team, your support team, other teams that exist in your company, even R&D. You need beta testers. Do you need clients who are going to agree to be early adopters? Go talk to your R&D and your engineering teams and figure that stuff out, especially if you're a sales leader, right? If you're a salesperson, go make friends. But a sales leader can make friends with those other departments. And if the reference team are drowning and their performance is being impacted because they don't have good references, you can make their lives a lot better by negotiating some of those things for them. So I'm a big proponent of making friends with the teams outside of just sales. Like, yes, bring the dollars in. That is your job. But how can we best help the company and your peers? Because what goes around comes around. It's going to help you at some point down the line.
The other thing that I think, and this may apply to a lot of early stage companies as well, is that if you're looking to try and get somebody as a reference, and you need to be able to prove value for future business, basically case studies of what the outcomes and the value delivered and derived by your solution have been. I can tell you that customer organizations are terrible at doing that. They go into procurements with all the best intentions of the world of, well, here's the reasons we're doing this. And yes, of course, we're going to sort of be able to prove that we've achieved value X or outcome Y, etc. Sometimes they need some help. They need some help to be able to drive that forward. So I've been in deals whereby we have actually effectively allowed them to have a discount, but the quid pro quo wasn't dollars. The quid pro quo was, you will allow us to help you measure this and analytically by benchmarking, working out what the before and the after is of us implementing this technology and then writing it up. And then you will agree that if we've agreed that this is what the outcome is, to letting us publish that. And maybe we publish it jointly. And I've gone so far as whereby we've actually had people publish in academic journals what the impact and outcomes of some of those things were. That is golden from a referenceability perspective, because suddenly it's a lot more credible than just your marketing flyer saying, well, generically, the value and benefits can be derived of this, or giving them an ROI calculator, which, a lot of customers will go, oh, okay, that's interesting, but I don't believe it, and I'm going to discount it 75% in terms of the values that come out of it, blah, 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 blah. They've all got a rationale as to why they are not going to believe that story out of the gate. But if you've actually got, a reference customer who has documented their process of how they proved their value, that is golden. So sometimes negotiating that in response for a better deal or a better relationship or priority support or whatever else it might be, that's incredibly valuable if you're at the early stage of a product and you're trying to get it established in the market.
Absolutely. So to summarize, I think I'm going to give my number one tip that I've learned in my career. And this was something I learned back in the day in my very, very first healthcare technology job. My manager at the time, Amanda Mitchell, who is a wonderful, very, very smart person, she sat us down, and we were customer advocates. So we were going to hospitals who were very pissed off with us and trying to fix them, right? Me and an engineer would go in and be like, hi, we're here to fix your stuff.
An engineer.
Yeah, I ended up marrying mine, but don't marry your sales engineer unless it works out. But anyway, regardless, the number one thing that she taught was when you're in these presentations at the end of your site visit, you're going to be in a room with C-suite, and sometimes you're going to have to tell them, you never invested in training, you never invested in this, and you did a really crappy job, and now you have crappy results because of it. And people don't like being told off. But if you keep talking and talking and talking and talking, they're never going to be able to respond. And if you ask a question, and I think we're all guilty of this sometimes, if we know it's an awkward question, we ask the question and then we ask it in another way and then a slightly different way. And then we say, well, maybe you think this, and we just blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. It sounds like, you know what, Bethany? It sounds like somebody should write a book about that. Maybe if they were to call it Agile Client Engagement, I think that would be an awesome idea.
That'd be a great book. But just being comfortable enough in negotiations to put something out there, especially if it's impersonal, Zoom or Teams or whatever, and just shut up. Just shut up and let them talk. Let them respond. I've seen so many salespeople, and I've been guilty of it myself. I've seen you do it too. You just talk and talk. You talk so much that you start a podcast with your dad. It's a great time. But I really do think one of the best tips is just shut up. Shut up and let the customer respond.
And I do think it's something that's quite powerful to just, particularly if you're at a very challenging part. To your point, it can sometimes feel very compelling that if the customer is, either grimacing on the other side or worse, and they're sort of like showing signs of distress on their side, that you just fill the void with repeating. Usually it's repeating the point over and over again. Customer heard you the first time. They still don't like it. Yeah. So therefore the answer is pause, hiatus.
Yeah.
Let them speak, because they haven't responded to it other than through their body language. And so you need to have the courage to stop banging the nail into the wood. Because if you keep doing it, you're going to damage the wood, i.e. the relationship. So therefore, sometimes just sitting back and letting the customer. It also applies at the beginning, whereby how do you find out what the customer really wants? Sometimes it's you present, this is here, this is the deal, this is the rationale, this is where we are. Then you shut up and let the customer react to that and let them come out, because oftentimes you may have assumed that one of their really important things is this, and then they come and they blurt out that, and you go, oh, okay, I would never have thought to ask that. Oh, now I understand, etc. So you and Amanda are 100% correct. Sometimes silence is an incredibly powerful tool in negotiations.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Meaningful silence here. Dad, what is your what is one of your tips or things that you should always remember when you're in a negotiation phase?
Normally, if you're at that negotiation stage with the customer, they actually want you. They want your solution. Occasionally, you'll find yourself in dual negotiations with another vendor who's at the table, and it can get tricky because you start second guessing everything that you're about, etc. But I've always had a kind of attitude of, my mum used to say this as I was growing up, and so here's your bit of Scottish wisdom for the day: what's for you will no go by you. In other words, if it's meant to happen, it'll happen. And so once you're in that negotiation phase, even if it's dual negotiations, they've probably already made up their mind. They're not really baking you off. They're just trying to keep the guy they really want on the hook. And they're trying to apply pressure by having this impression that they're still seriously considering. 90% of the cases, if there's dual negotiations, that's the truth. That even though they're negotiating with you, it's either you or the other guy, and they've already decided. So, just enter into it in the best spirit and go on from there. So I think that's one of the things that I think, just in terms of being sane. But if it's down to you, your vendor of choice, and they're negotiating, don't try and what was that other phrase that I learned when I came to the States? Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. In other words, it's okay to want to get what you want out of a deal commercially. But you push too far, deal's going to die. And so that is really what that analogy is saying. If you've never heard it before, it's probably because it's been expunged from polite society. But it was a very powerful metaphor that I learned when I first moved here to the States.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to, in all things, there's a million techniques, there's a million programs, there's a million different worksheets that you can fill out to negotiate something. But at the end of the day, it is your reputation. It is your career. It's your company's career, company's reputation as well, right? You don't want people to go, oh my gosh, that company hires complete jerks. I never want to do business with them again. But it's your reputation as a person. And so sometimes you have to walk away. Sometimes you do have to burn a little bit of a bridge, but you have to be very careful when it comes to burning bridges. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to go to bed that night and put your head on the pillow and say, okay, I was fair. I negotiated smartly,
I can sleep.
hard, whatever, but I can sleep. I don't have any guilt because I negotiated in a mean way. At the end of the day, we're in healthcare, right? We are all, I hope, working with the mission of making healthcare better, making patients better,
absolutely,
making clinicians' lives better so that they can save lives.
Yeah.
This isn't silly stuff that we're selling. This is life-changing stuff. Even if it's a piece of software in supply chain management and it feels very kind of middleware day-to-day, you are a cog in the healthcare machine. So as long as you can go to sleep after you've negotiated and be at peace with how you have conducted business today, this week, this month, this year, you're on the right path.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that might be about enough today. What I'll do now is I'll negotiate with our listeners and say, if you liked this episode, please like, share a comment, subscribe. We are on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, wherever you need to find us, you can find us.
Yep. And you can find us on Substack too, where I host my writing, and that's haverin.substack.com.
Absolutely. And now, next week's episode is an episode that is dear to our hearts, literally, when it comes to Dad, because we are going to be talking about National Lung Transplant Day, which is October 9th.
Yep, we are. So to get everybody up to speed, I received a double lung transplant in the spring of 2023. The hilarious part of that is I actually had the surgery on April 1st. So I get to remember April Fool's Day forever now. And it's completely changed my life. I got very sick very quickly. I mean, that actually was a blessing, and we'll tell a little bit about that in the next episode. But I am incredibly robust. I am incredibly alive and very grateful not only to have received the care and attention of Vanderbilt University Medical Center, who cared for me during that, but also to my donor, who obviously passed to be able to give me the gift that he decided he wanted to leave, and to his family in terms of what they sacrificed to be able to allow someone else to live. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So it's a much more personal story that we're going to be covering in the next episode.
Absolutely. We're going to talk a little bit about Dad's story, the lessons we've learned in the whole process. I mean, the insight that you get into healthcare when you are a patient or the family member of a patient going through something this complex it just gives you a whole brand new appreciation of the industry that we are lucky enough to work in. And we are going to strongly encourage everyone, if you are not already, please sign up to be an organ donor. We'll share all the right links in the next episodes.
Absolutely.
And everything. But to echo Dad's sentiments, we are so thankful for his donor's family and the beautiful gift that he gave us, because Dad is still here. We would not have a podcast without the double lung transplant 2 years ago. Who would have thought that?
Yeah, you would be able to not hear me breathing as I speak to you here, maintaining my nice resonant voice.
Exactly.
So we hope you'll join us. But until then, keep havering.